Welcome, everyone. Today is a very special day because we're thrilled to have the incredibly talented Ben Wilson, best known as the keyboardist and backing vocals for the legendary band Blues Traveler. Ben, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, man. Thanks a lot for having me, Lou. This is fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really appreciate having you as well. And you've been a busy guy. You're currently touring the country, celebrating the 30th anniversary of Blues Traveler 4, which, quite frankly, is an album that has cemented its place in rock history. And I actually had the privilege of seeing y'all recently. You came through Raleigh and you played at the Ritz. And Ben, I'm just going to be honest with you. The raw energy, I mean, there wasn't a single dull moment to the entire set. And I could tell you, it is clear that you and the band still have that powerful spark because you ignited the fans. They were going crazy at the venue.
That was a particularly good night. There was Raleigh, and then we played recently in Atlanta. And just when you get that level of fan engagement or a crowd engagement back at you, it just any musician will tell you it just elevates the way the band is feeling. So then everybody as a group and then individually, people, it picks everybody up. So it's that constant kind of, we put it out, it comes back, and it just keeps kind of this momentum that builds and builds and builds and builds. And Raleigh was particularly one of those fun shows. I've kind of learned to not spend too much time adjudicating my own playing or how I thought the band played, because you're so subjective in that moment. And if my foot hurt or you know, my wife and I got in a fight on the phone that day, so many things can color your perception of what's going on in a show, and you're usually just completely wrong. You know what I mean? It's like you can't, all you can do is judge based on how the crowd reacted and talking to people like you afterwards saying, hey, that was just a blast, because that's what we're there for. We want people to have fun.
Well, we had a lot of fun, and I'm just kind of curious. I mean, it took me a minute to realize this myself. 30th anniversary of 4. I mean, I remember when this album came out on compact disc. I was constantly heavily rotated in my CD player. And then there was this moment of like, I'm getting old. 30 years celebration of this album. How does it feel to be on the road celebrating the 30th anniversary of this album?
Gratitude. I mean, yes, we're getting older. You can't run away from that. But 30 years on, and people are still willing to come out and see us play, whether it's because of the record or just because they like the band. And definitely that record was very big and sort of the cultural, it dug deep into the culture in that particular time because of Run Around and Hook, and then like a lot of bands after that, there was we weren't able to maintain that popular top 40 success, but like a lot of bands that get to that level, you have some years where you're up there and everything's rocking, and then there's a little bit of a dip down where you kind of dip below that sort of that line of American culture where people are very aware of you, and just to be able to continue to do this for all these years is just fantastic. And another thing about that, at the Atlanta show that I referenced, we John apparently, when they after the 4 got released, they came through Atlanta, which had always been a really good market for us and great fans there. And they were doing the usual songs, and it was rocking, and then they started Running Around, and John said it was just, we felt like the Beatles, just like this mass, all of a sudden we're Taylor Swift, you know what I mean? And then for 30 years later to get into Atlanta then and have that same kind of reaction to, we played at the Tabernacle. It was a pretty full house, and they were loud and fun, like Raleigh was, loud and fun and responsive, and it's like, wow, this has been a pretty good run.
It's one of those albums too, like how iconic it is. It's not just the music, it's even the cover. And you could even remove the cat from the cover and just have a photo of that cat, and people automatically know what it represents and the music behind it. It's
Kind
just
of does.
such a iconic piece in music history.
I think John as the primary songwriter really was able to cement his own personal journeys with songwriting in that moment. It was very honest. It was very direct, but it had bigger meanings. And so it's just, and then plus just the pop sensibility of Runaround in particular, which I think is what was the first song to catch.
It makes sense because I think you could feel that in the music itself.
Yeah.
Now, we're actually here today to talk about one of your projects, but before we do, I
Another
have to
piece of
ask.
rock history, Louis. Let's be honest. It's another piece of rock and roll history. It's going to go down. I love
The
to joke
best
about that.
album ever is
And-
right here. It's the
yeah,
best album ever.
right in your little hands.
10 songs of perfection. We're going to
Yeah.
talk about it in detail here in a moment, but I have to ask,
So
Ben, and you don't have to share if you're not allowed, but I have to ask, with the latest Blues Traveler album coming out last year, is there anything on horizon for the band that you can share with us?
I don't know. It's not that we're not interested in doing it. It's just such a different world now, man. You see these bands that you know and love, and they put out these songs, and you're like, this is a great song, and then you never hear it again. And and then you go, but then you see these clips of them on YouTube playing these songs, and it's almost like the albums have switched. It used to be that was your primary statement, and then the live shows sort of supported that, and now it's more like, here's our record, and it's a means to kind of keep things, almost a promotion for the live shows. It's really switched. If you're not Taylor Swift or those really top pop bands, it's wild. It's been a real shift in the industry. So I don't know exactly what we're going to do. We haven't focused a ton on whether we're going to get back in and do any original work, but we've been pretty focused in that direction our whole career. And I can't imagine, one of the reasons that I released my record is because I was building up this backlog of tunes that there was no outlet for. And, I think Chan, who you had on here, had a very similar experience. It's like, God, I just have all these songs, and there's enough of them that are kind of sticking with me to make me think that maybe they're better than just, a lot of times you write a song and 3 weeks later you've totally forgotten about it. And to me, that often is a good indicator that perhaps you should forget about it, but, or maybe scrap it for parts. But, and I think, when we did Hurry Up and Hang Around, and I think that was 2019, maybe, it was a similar deal. We had built up all this time, because all these tunes, because we had been writing songs with these other artists. And so we'll see. We may get there. It's certainly something that we would aspire to, but there hasn't been any active conversation.
Well, Ben, it sounds like you've been definitely keeping yourself really busy, and you just highlighted you'd been at work creating your own music. You just released this. This is your much anticipated sophomore album, Wilson Arms, Heroes and Hangmen. You're laughing, but
I don't
I
know
got
if
to
it
tell
was.
you,
I'm laughing at the much anticipated. I'm not sure that it was much anticipated by anybody but me. But I'm appreciative for all the people that have, the fives of people that have rushed out to buy the record.
it's a fantastic record. I'm not lying when I said I really enjoyed the entire album. Every song to me was a good song. There was no dead tracks on either side. I really, really enjoyed it. But I know a lot of folks watching has probably never listened to it. So maybe you can introduce the band and share what listeners can expect the moment they listen to Heroes and Hangmen.
Wow. Introduce the band. Basically, the band is me and one of my oldest musical buddies, a guy named Rob Avsharian, who's a drummer. He and I played in our first bands together in middle school. I think ninth grade. I joined a band that he was in, and it was called Third Rail. And we played for a while, and then high school finished. And he went to Berkeley School of Music, then he went to University of North Texas, where there was a great drum program. And he got into a band called Bob Goblin, and then a band called Adventures of Jet, both of which had some got signed and had some label backing. But like most bands that get signed, they didn't really get the support they needed, and nothing really happened beyond that. And over time, we stayed in touch, and um, he has a vast network of musician friends and stuff. So we've always stayed in touch and talk about things. And whenever Throwing Wrenches came out, I went with my wife to see him in Dallas play with a couple of guys, the DeShazo brothers, who are just fantastic musicians, and said, you know what, I could do a record, because it's not really going to have a band feel because we don't all play together, but at least the three of them will have played together. So basically, that was more of a live thing where we went into the studio, recorded as a group for 3 or 4 days, recorded the songs, and then I sort of did some stuff on top of it. And Rob has always been good for me. He's a good taste maker for me because I'll have all these ideas and throw a bunch of crap at the wall, and a lot of times it's too much, or it takes it in a cheesy direction, or just not right. And he's always been a good person to be like, that horn thing. It kind of goes from the four of us jamming to it sounds like Saturday Night Live, and those kinds of feedback, which can hurt your feelings if you're in the wrong frame of mind, but you need people like that.
Yeah.
And then during the pandemic, we all had a lot of time on our hands, especially as musicians. And he had told me that he had some recording gear for his drum set in the basement. And so I started putting together little things and sending them to him. And he would put down a drum track and send it to me, and we'd talk about it. And, he'd reassure me that it was cool, or I'd reassure him that it was cool. And then we slowly started building these tracks out. And he can also play guitar, and he can also play some keys. And so it was kind of this cool thing of back and forth where I did the majority of the songwriting, but then he would add cool things like in that song Bleeding Heart. There's a section after you come out of the solo section, which has a little bit of a key change, and then he wrote this really cool, basically the song is basically a one chord. I think it's an F, so you get a lot of F. I'm gonna go a little wonky here for just a minute. You get a lot of F, and then because of his musical uh, theory knowledge, which is way superior to mine, he was able to piece this cool little thing together that makes you feel like you're rising out of this monotony of this one key that's in your head before you go into the outro, which is more and more of the same. And I remember when he goes, "Is that too Todd Rundgren for you?" And I was like, "No," because I never would have come up with it. And so it was that kind of interplay between the two of us. And as time went on, his recording gear got better, my recording gear got better. I think the songs got better. I think we got better and better at communicating with one another. And then when I needed to have an actual guitar solo, like somebody who could actually play a solo, because neither one of us can really just sit down and whip off a solo, then I brought in my buddy Corey Butler, who's a really good slide player, and then Nick Petroff and Lang Freeman did a little bit of guitar too.
See, you have a band. It's not
I
just
do.
yourself.
It is not just myself. No,
Good job.
100% no. I could not do it. I could not do it just myself. And if I tried to do it just myself, it wouldn't be as good. I believe strongly in a band format. I've always been in bands. I've never, I've been called in to like lay down a keyboard part on songs. But I don't. Rare is the artist, in my opinion. Prince, maybe.
Mm.
Stevie Wonder, maybe, who can just see the whole thing in their head and have it come out the way it does without things being over the top here or underbaked here. Maybe the Beatles, those kinds of people that are just supremely talented. And nowadays when you see these when you see, a Bruno Mars track, yeah, there's Bruno Mars and that's who But if all the people that have contributed to that down the line, and that's not a criticism, it's just a reality of sometimes how you make better music. I mean, there's a reason some of the greatest records of all time took a year to make. You know what I mean? Like some of the greatest records didn't, but like Dark Side of the Moon, that didn't come out in a day. So anyway,
Yeah. Talking about the album, let's go back to the album for a moment. What
sure.
inspired the themes and the sound for the album, and how did the vision of this album kind of come together?
The vision, there wasn't necessarily a vision of the record. It's like I said, it started very piecemeal and, oh, this is fun. I think like a lot of people, I sort of envisioned that maybe I could learn how to do a little bit of mixing inside of the box, the computer. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that terminology, but in the box means in the computer. as opposed to the old school way where you're in a studio and it's analog tape and everything is all the hardware stuff is on the wall and you plug in your compressors. Now everything is in the box. You can do a lot of things, and most people actually do, Pro Tools and all the instruments and the compressors, and there's tons of companies that try to model these things digitally, and they're incredible. It's incredible. I've never been much of an audiophile in terms of being able to understand. Uh, I can hear when somebody knows what they're doing and they change the sound from this to this with a piece of hardware or a piece of software. But I was hoping that maybe I could start to learn how to do that, given the fact that I'd been around studios and music my whole life. But very quickly came to realize that that was just a waste of my time. I'd rather just, try to write the songs and then come up with cool little things here and there that appealed to me. And and then also during the pandemic, it was kind of a time of a lot of political upheaval for all parties. The Black Lives Matter stuff, the pandemic, and some would say overreactions, some would say proper reactions, but regardless, Trump came in. There's a lot of controversy around that, and it was just there was a lot to be thinking about. There was a lot to be assessing in American history and Trump and what it all meant and how individuals fit into that. And then and then just some of the personal stuff, the gratitude around my marriage and my family and trying to express all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, so you feel the challenges of the time kind of shape the creative and production process for the album?
It shaped the creative process in terms of the writing
Right.
and the vocals, and the singing and the songs, I mean. But to be honest, a lot of the sound of the record came about just what I had available in my computer at the time. And if I saw something that was cool, I might buy a new plugin and then, oh, look, that song has some of that sound on it. You know what I mean? And because there's just endless libraries of digital sounds. Roland has something called Roland Cloud, which has all these digital recreations of some of their best keyboards. I used that a lot. That was a ton of fun. United Universal Audio has cool remakes of the Moog synthesizer. Keyscape has all these old digital models of Wurlitzers and clavinets and all that stuff. And so what did I have available? And then taking the time to look through. And I've never been great at like sound creation, but I can take an existing sound and kind of make it sound the way that I kind of want to make it sound.
Mhm.
As opposed to a lot of guys that want to get in there and open up the hood and mess around, like our bass Tad. Going back to Blues Traveler, Tad is like that, man. He'll spend hours working with his pedal board and a computer trying to get just the right sound. And isn't it funny when he gets on stage, he's super prepared and that sound comes out and it sounds fantastic. Whereas me, I'm up there like, oh, that sound didn't work. Abort, because I didn't always spend the time, getting it ready before I got on stage. So it was a combination of things. A lot of the creative process came from the time, the fact that I had more time to really learn how to shape these sounds and make things sound decent on the recording side helped. And I think Rob also had more time. So it was, it was like a combination of all these different factors that definitely had to do. I don't know that I would have sat down and made myself finish these songs. One of the things that's hard for me is I'll get a verse and a chorus and then stall out. And if I don't force myself to sit down and finish it, I'll never finish it. And, the classic procrastination of something that you kind of got to pull out of yourself sometimes.
Yeah, I think everybody falls victim to that, you
Totally
know?
right. Totally
Yeah.
right.
Well, I'm gonna talk about the sound a little bit here. I mean, Heroes and Hangman is a significant departure from your earlier work, including throwing wrenches.
Yeah.
What are some of the key changes or evolutions in your musical style do you feel are most evident in this album?
Well, first of all, I think the singing is vastly improved. I've never considered myself a particularly good singer, but I think I was trying to do too much on throwing wrenches. I had all these sounds in my head that I wanted to get into the music, but from a vocal standpoint, but was not. it not didn't have the skill. And I think I did a much better job of just singing the songs and not trying to be more than I could ever be. And because I hear, I grew up listening to the Beatles, you know what I mean? It's like all these big soaring choruses and lots of and there's a reason the Beatles were able to do that. It's not just that they were skillful singers, it's just they knew what they were doing. And when you try to think you can just walk in and do that stuff off the street, you get a little bit of a rude awakening. So that would have been a little bit different, I think. I wasn't I wasn't as afraid on this record that things are going to sound derivative, like yeah, I'm playing piano. I'm kind of a bluesy guy. My songs are going to sound like other songs. So how can we address that honestly and not worry about that it's starting from a place that is not recognizable, and then try to use the process as the recording process, which like bands like Wilco and other bands like that. One of the things, at least when Jay Bennett was around, and then shortly thereafter, I think one of the things that they really did is they just broke these songs down and if you're playing a C chord, it's like, well, maybe we don't need the whole C chord. Maybe we just need the E in this, and or maybe we don't need the guitar here. Why can't we do a busy drum thing in this ballad? And being letting themselves kind of be creative to the way the song was kind of flowing. And Spoon did that too in a really cool way. Kind of, broke these songs down and then built them back up. And that's super cool. So I was sort of trying to emulate that. Um, and Yeah, I think that's the biggest departure. And I had more time, you know what I mean? Because I was
Yeah.
doing it and I could really craft it the way I heard it in my head, again, with the feedback from people like Rob and then Lang, who we haven't spoken about yet.
Well, you also had some personal milestones too since throwing wrenches, right? You got your fatherhood now, marriage, right?
Fatherhood, marriage, yep.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel some of these milestones influence the themes and the tone of your songwriting?
Um, Maybe the throwing wrenches, I think, was very backwards looking, um, in a personal way, like, more my youth and insecurities and stuff like that. And this album has some of that, but it's less me, 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 me. It's the way it's how I'm looking at the world and the way I'm thinking about things, but it's more thoughtful about the world as opposed to
Mm.
just, oh, here I am throwing wrenches. You know what I'm saying? And I think people Tom Petty could probably pull off writing a whole record about his own woes, but I don't know that I have the capacity to do that without it getting a little old. But I listen back to Throwing Wretched and there's plenty that I like about it. But I can see what was wrong with it. And I can already hear on this record that, oh shit, I should have spent a little bit more time trying to craft that phrase a little bit better. But at a certain point, you know what I mean? One of the things John is really good at, John Popper, is he hears what he wants to hear in his head and he goes for it. And there's just not a lot of room for him and what is going to be acceptable. You know what I mean? And there's one side of me that's like, well, that can really leave you vulnerable to not doing your very best. But on the other hand, that's that's what it is. And you can't argue with the guy's creative and success and his musical ability and talent. So I both really admire that and wish I had a little bit more of that so that I wasn't constantly going back and forth like, no, this is the way that it is, and he does, it's not like a dictator. It's just that's what he hears and that's what sounds right to him. And it shouldn't be any other way. And I'm not as much like that. So and I actually really enjoy the process as well of, well, if you're singing this note, there are 4 different chords that you could play underneath that. What if we tried a different one just to see what it sounded like? And for him, it's very clear, no. But for me, it can be more open, um, to interpretation.
Yeah, I want to dive a little bit deeper too on the sound. The album sort of blends this blues, rock, and pop with elements that I would say is reminiscent of the '70s and '80s,
Oh
if I
yeah.
can say that. What do you think drew you to this combination of genres, and how did you achieve that blend cohesively?
I don't maybe the jury's out on whether I achieved that blend cohesively. Um, Rob, in one of the interviews, he said, you know, it's kind of a love letter to our favorite bands, favorite artists, and favorite grooves. You know, it's like we grew up in the '70s. I came of age. I was 10 in '77, and you know, it's the height of just coming out of album rock right into some punk rock, and then we're getting into the '80s, which is full of synths and the kind of flushing down of all the analog instruments of the '70s and moving into the Yamaha DX7s and that whole world where you could then buy a Hohner clavinet D6 for $200 because nobody wanted one anymore. They thought they could all, you know, or like all of Prince's stuff is synth stuff, you know, and a lot of people hated it because it was not they didn't hate the music, they hated the sounds. Or Hall and Oates. I mean, if all those songs were played on analog old school instruments, it would sound like the baddest ass soul music you've ever heard because they're fantastic songs with fantastic singers. But I didn't like it very much because of the tones. You know, it didn't sound like Humble Pie or you know, Stevie Wonder before, you know, of the '70s, songs in the key of life, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of it is you're not even trying necessarily to be you're not trying to copy that. It just happens. You know what I mean? You'll hear something like, "Oh, I love that sound," and then you kinda start messing with it, and, like, Bleeding Heart again is, you know, I was messing around with an arpeggiator and an old synth model on I think it was in Rolling Cloud, actually, and I just, "Oh, this sounds really cool," and then you just never know where the spark's gonna come from, you know? There's this spark, and then that led me to this idea, which led me to that idea, and the next thing you know, you got a song,
Mhm.
so it wasn't necessarily that I was thinking, "Oh, I wanna write a song like, you know, '80s synth pop," but there's a lot of synth on there. You know, I'm a keyboard player. I don't play guitar as well, and I think sometimes synth the other thing is, just by virtue of my instrument, sometimes synth can really take the place in that tonal range, of guitar. You know what I mean? You have those analog keyboard sounds, which everybody knows. There was the Rhodes and the Wurlitzer and the Hammond, and you know, you're never gonna hear a shortage of that in my music. But you know, that synth stuff can be guitar-y in a way. You know, it doesn't take the place of it, but it can sort of make you not miss it as much if you're a rock fan.
You mentioned earlier about your long-standing partnership with Rob. I'm just kinda curious, how did the 2 of you, because you both seem to have strong opinions on music, how did the 2 of you balance the creative input and sort of the decision making? What was the final song gonna sound like?
I mean, I think in the end, Rob, unless he felt really strong well, the thing is Rob could really change how a song is gonna feel based on how he decides he wants to play the drum track, you know,
Yeah.
because what I usually do is write the song, or get close to it, just a model of it, and then with a kind of a crappy, drum track, and then send it to Rob, and a lot of the times he goes, "Oh, I really like your sensibility on the drum," and then he kinda does his thing and copies it and, sends that to me to see, but if he decides that he doesn't like the way the drums should be, then it can really change my approach to how the rest of the song is gonna work on my end, and so he did have some, kinda control and input there. On that song, Heroes and Hangmen, I has very much it could be when I first wrote it, I was worried that it sounded too much like Running on Empty by Jackson Browne because it has that similar "Run dun, 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 dun," and I heard it, but unfortunately, I heard a very similar drum thing, and he was like, "Well, if you put the drums like that, then it is Running on Empty by Jackson Browne," and I was like, okay, well, can it be kinda like that? But then maybe in a way that doesn't make you feel like it's that exact same song because the rest of the song is not like it at all, but just part of the groove. And, so there were some conversations like that. I mean, if it got down to the bitter end, um, I know I you know, we're such good friends, and we understand each other so well, we've known each other so long, and the stakes are so low, you know what I mean? It's we're not this isn't a decision for whether Taylor Swift or Beyonce is going to be able to get a Grammy nod. You know what I mean? It's about what feels good to us and our own integrity in terms of our musical thing. And Rob has a lot of integrity about what he really feels is good and what he feels is not good. And I don't always feel like I have as good a sense of that. I know what I like, and uh, and that's what I'm going to gravitate towards. But I'm not always. I don't always feel like I'm the judge. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I will often defer to him, and what that usually does, if that does happen, then like I said with if he changes up the drum thing, then the song very much changes, and my approach to it very much changes, even if the lyrics are the same and the melody is the same. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It sounds like you guys not only have a long-standing professional relationship, but also a friendship to build that trust over the years to be open and vulnerable with each other on what needs to change and sort of say, no, maybe you're wrong, or maybe we approach it this way, but you don't take it personal. You take it as part of the creative process to make a better song for the listeners.
You're absolutely right. And ego in music is one of the biggest problems. You know, you walk into a studio and, you know, you get all wrapped up in your own little part. And does my part suck? And somebody says, I don't like that part. And you take it as, you know, I don't like your playing and your mother or your children and everything else. And you know, you go into a little ball and like, oh my God, they hate me. But it's, no, no, we just don't like that you played that part. And you can really get wrapped up in your own little ego in a way that's not does not further the project. And I do think being the fact that Rob and I, before anything else, are friends, you know, we check in with each other once in a while just to make sure that, you know, he wasn't pissed off about something or I wasn't. But and also, you don't know Rob. He's probably the coolest, chillest, least judgmental, mellowest dude in the history of dudes. He's just very cool. A lot of, you know, he's got his own personal opinions, but he does not put that shit on anybody else ever. He's pretty remarkable that way.
Yeah,
And
it sounds like a good guy.
yeah, he's a great guy. And I mean, he's as good a drummer as there is, really. And in terms of what he can do, I'm like, well, you know, what can you do? You know, tell me something. Oh, well, you know, I can shift the beat you know, a 16th note and then bring it back or this, that, and the other. And I'm like, Jesus, you know, and he could be playing with a lot of different people and it's just never really interested in him that much. He likes doing what he does and he's married now um and he's just completely humble. And so that makes it very easy as well. And
Yeah.
he's very supportive. You know, he wants, you know, he's doing this mostly as a favor. I mean, I think he enjoys the creative outlet as well. Um, but you know, he's psyched to see me doing something that I enjoy.
Ben, let me ask you this. There's going to be folks that didn't even know this album existed until now. They're going to go stream this album. What do you hope these listeners take away from the music?
Well, first of all, I hope they enjoy it. You know what I mean? And that it speaks to them and they have some emotional connection to it because I think that's what the music that you love and the music that sticks with you is the music that you have some kind of an emotional connection to. For me as a musician, there can be songs that are just songs that I love because they're great songs, you know, Lovely Day by Bill Withers or something like that. And
Mm,
then there's albums that I love because they feature musicians that I think are fantastic. There's an album called The Dynamic Duo with Jimmy Smith and Wes Montgomery, which is this jazz kind of big band swing where Jimmy Smith and Wes Montgomery just throw down on their solos and it's just bluesy and awesome. Um, so I hope when people listen to it, they can, you know, I think this will be more of a sort of a connection, more on the Lovely Day kind of side of things. If people can connect to the songs, and you know, hey, well, Ben Wilson kind of knows what he's doing. You know, this isn't so bad. Maybe I'll like this record, and if he puts out another one or more songs, I'll continue to stream them. And you know, I'm not sure what else you hope for. You hope people don't listen to go, that guy sucks. He should stick with his day job. That's for damn sure.
but you did segue into another great question. What's next for Wilson Arms? Do we have to wait another 11 years for the next album? What's in the future?
El Hey One, if they say it in Pig Latin. I am super committed now to continuing to kind of write, and I've already got a couple tunes out to my old buddy Rob to see what he can do with. And I don't know whether it makes sense for a guy like me to put out LPs if I'm not able to go play a bunch of live shows and stuff like that. But I'm sort of hoping, one of the big things that was there was my son. He's 17. He turns 18 here in a few weeks, and he's graduating from high school. And when you travel as much as I did, it was way more. I mean, pretty much what I waited for my whole life, aside from being able to be a professional musician, was to be a father. And when I was able to have that experience, there was really nothing else that I wanted to do more. So, if I'd come home from tour and say, "Hey, let's go play golf. Let's go do this with some of my buddies." And I'm like, I love golf, but I'm not spending 5 hours on the golf course when I could be home with my son, who
Yeah.
learned how to walk when I was on tour. You know what I mean? And I don't want to miss those kinds of things. And if I am going to miss them because I'm traveling, it's not going to be because I'm effing off with my pals,
Yeah.
so now, returning to that, that does put a, 15-year gap in my sort of, I live in Austin, Texas, and my Austin sort of musical community roots. So, I'd like to spread my wings a little bit there, just to have a little bit more of a presence and a little bit more of some of that musician camaraderie that I kind of miss. What's another thing with Rob is, we get on the phone and start talking, and, oh, did you check this out? Did you check that out? Did you check this out? And, I got another really good friend who's a music dude who, he doesn't play. He was a musician, but now he just loves music, and he goes to all kinds of shows all the time. And I love talking to him because he's constantly up on newer bands. And so anyway, not yet another long-winded answer to a very simple question. The answer is no. I will continue, whether they like it or not.
Well, it's actually good news. As I mentioned at the beginning, Wilson Arms, Heroes and Hangmen is a fantastic album. Every track here, 10 tracks of just pure bliss, pure bluesy rock, good soulful music. Really loved it and enjoyed the hell out of it, Ben. And thank you for publishing this. And thank you for your time to share with us your insights on the album. For those watching, you can stream on your favorite online streaming platform. You can pick up the vinyl record at experiencevinyl.com or really any online retailer. You can also score a copy like I did at the Blues Traveler 4 anniversary tour, which is really cool because then you can keep your tickets with the record. You have a nice memory of the occasion.
Very nice.
Ben, yeah. As we come to a close, my friend, is there any final words?
I don't think so. I'll send you the $1,000 for doing this in a separate envelope. Oh, wait. Oh, I thought we weren't recording.
I'll edit that. I'll edit that.
Thank you so much, Lou. I really appreciate your time, man. This is cool.
Thank you, Ben. It was great to have you on.
You too, man.